but I have not been where there was an ombuds office, so it's new to me.
Well, thank you, Nancy. You saw from our briefing materials, it was ombuds offices were established by headquarters in 2004, so there are ombuds at every center, and we have monthly meetings, and we're actually part of the International Ombuds Association, so we go through very formal training before we, start having visitors in our cases, and we have training with the agency as well. And as you know, it's our collateral duty. So it's in addition to what we do, and we report directly to you. So that protects some of the confidentiality and independence. So we'll just go around and tell you who we are as far as our other work. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm an optical designer. I was optical design lead for Roman.
Excellent.
That was my kind of coup de grace, probably my career. I'm now working on some projects to. Never mind. I'm working on a lot of projects.
Good.
And I've been on ombuds. I'm one of the 3 newbies, so to say, who came on last year. And I went to the Seattle annual conference this year. Learned a lot. Really got a good broad impression of what we do. I have a lay counseling and mediation background before I came on as ombuds. And I'm excited to be part of the team here, and it's been an interesting journey.
Excellent. Thank you.
So I've been at Wallace Life Facility. This is my 13th year, and I put leadership team and do education leadership development. I was at headquarters 4 years prior to that. And I've been an ombuds for 10 years, so have a great opportunity with all of our new ombuds to bring in some new experience expertise. So.
Excellent.
I am a contracting officer here. Right now, I'm supporting GOES-R and GOES. Immediate former previous was Chris Claymation. I've been a coach and a mentor here for over 8 years.
Oh, okay.
And I'm also one of the new.
Kim, I'm an astrophysicist living for 600. I study black holes. I've been in civil servant for over 20 years and ombuds for about 8 years.
Okay. Good.
A lot has gone on since the time that I started.
And I'm a business management officer here now. I support OCOM and OSTEM for business needs. My past life was at IBMV as an on-site employee there. Was a contractor for 5 years and transitioned to civil service in 2013. Women's Employee Resource Group for a number of years. Diversity Dialogue Facilitator, and was also part of the diversity, I am blanking on the name of it right now, but we did during the pandemic, come together with particular diversity dialogue, ERG type people for focusing on D&I issues for the center. And that's pretty much it.
One of the things that's really helpful for us is we work across all of Goddard. So Friday I got a call from Greenbelt, and I'll consult with Kim, and so it's helpful that we can work at any of our facilities.
Yeah, and I was going to say it's helpful that we have somebody who knows IVNV from the inside. That's very much appreciated, and of course Wallace, but yeah.
Diversity thought leader was what I couldn't get earlier.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
We had a diversity thought leader group come together about things, have diversity challenges on the center.
So wanted to make sure we had time for any questions or clarifications you needed beyond our presentation, or whatever.
Well, I think, just a general point of discussion, I saw that, the usage has increased. What is the state of things at Goddard right now? Obviously there's stuff in there, but in human words, what are the things that you guys are seeing that are, most troubling? I mean, I'm guessing that some of the things that you deal with are, end up getting escalated to HR, but what are the things that you're seeing? What do I need to know? Depression.
Women are suffering.
Say more.
Women are at the end of their rope in terms of this workforce, and their young ones are leaving. I'm in a harassing situation myself right now. Women are being harassed, bullied, talked down to, demeaned, disrespected. It's become rampant, and That's not to say there's not other groups suffering too. I think LGBTQ plus people have felt a lot of fear.
Yeah.
But for women, it's gotten worse. I don't remember this being this way when I started. It was so much nicer and more pleasant.
Okay, so what on earth has happened?
There's an entitlement to control the female that is coming out of the men I work with that was never there before. And these are people who were my bosses, were my colleagues, used to be equal to me, and their attitudes are so condescending and mean, and as if we don't have the right to use our brains. I've seen this in engineering also very much lately. It's running people out. It's running young women out. And unfortunately, I think they end up either leaving or filing grievances, which is not what we want to see happen.
Of course not. That's
We don't wanna see
who wants to
people
have to
fight.
deal with that? Yeah.
We don't
Right.
want to see the union called up. We don't want to see any of that. But, you know, you go to try and find help. I've even looked for, like, someone asks me, how do I solve this? I'll do research. And I find that the agency says, well, if you have this problem, go to your ombuds. I'm like, well, I can't go to myself. So the problem, I was even telling her driving over, if the only place to go is us and not HR, and you can't go to HR for help, then people are really stuck in this bad
Yeah.
cycle.
And I think people will come to us because they're afraid of retaliation. And so the fact, especially when they know that for real, we're confidential, we're
Right.
not gonna go with their supervisor, then they feel more comfortable. Whether it's, I think people lost some courtesy during COVID, just even some behavior on teleworking, which hasn't totally gone on Teams meeting. I think people are feeling pressured, and if you feel like, you've gotta do more work, less people to do it, then I think courtesies and patience go out the window.
And I attribute it to full cost accounting. The day we went to full cost, I was in a training class at Wallops for leadership, and I had to go cry in the corner because I knew, projecting that forward, that we would become the most incredibly bullying organization under full cost, where it's all about resources and dollars. And when people gain control, especially the males in power, that's all they think about. And they've turned into this. They want this way in the beginning. But the more they need to grab money and resources, the more the human element falls away. And it just cycled down to the point where even our admins are so stressed they have to take extra vacation time because they're literally just saying, I have to disconnect. My boss is losing sleep, she's having back problems, she's younger than me, she's in her 40s. I mean, these women are just breaking apart.
Are you seeing something similar?
I agree with what Kim is expressing. Before I became an ombuds, in the mentoring and coaching capacity, I was hearing so much of that, that I termed it as this is a cultural norm here at Goddard. I can't speak for the other centers or headquarters, but it just seemed to be an acceptable way to do business. There was no punishment or training for the individuals that were inflicting this on others. It was just, we need this person, so just ignore them.
Yep.
Ignore the behavior, don't take it so personal, kind of. Or we can move you to another office so you don't have to deal with them. So the person continues to do it to the next individual, and it never gets corrected. So I don't know what the answer is on how we fix that, but it is causing people to leave. It's causing people to not want to work here, or being depressed when they wake up to have to start their day because they know what they're going to endure. Or if they have Wednesday meetings with that individual, they know what to expect. And it's not, doesn't make for a nice place to work, or as we are termed, the best place to work.
I think Goddard says the right thing, headquarters says the right things, but the accountability down to every level just isn't there. And inadvertently, I think we end up reinforcing the misbehaving people because they stay and others leave.
And if the accountability is articulated in a leadership way, it's how has somebody worked the system in the accountability process. So I left IBM for a reason. I'm a fully competent, capable woman of knowledge and skill and had no vertical mobility within that program. And when asked, I articulated my concerns about this is what it looks like in terms of how this program is run. I will never have an opportunity to grow in leadership, and here's what I see. And then the response is, you don't know all of the details that go into this decision, right? And that has been a leadership excuse rampantly across programs at the center and probably across the agency. I've heard it from some of my peers at other centers that a lot of times, well, it's just how leadership gets their agenda forward, as opposed to really empowering people to grow, empowering women to grow in leadership. And you've seen the OIG report as well. Women at Goddard have reverted. If you look at the demographic breakdown of the numbers at IBMV in the last 10 years, how many women do they have as civil servants in that organization? 3. I think they're at 3 now.
Yeah.
In the last 2 years, 3 women have left. 2 women engineers. And 2 of them are here at Greenbelt as employees now.
Yeah.
So we take the culture, and there may be a microcosm culture. We might think, oh, it's just one org that has a problem, but that org has a similar problem to this org, to that org, to this org. One of my visitors is in the process of filing multiple grievances in an organization where we've had conversations where there's a culture of how a particular demographic of women are treated in that organization, held to a different standard, held to a different growth path. Men are of lesser GS grade are given opportunity and flexibility and leeway, and women of higher GS level than their male peers are held to micromanagement reporting and time accounting and like tasking that's not even in their performance plan, that then they're held accountable to it, even though it wasn't ever in their performance plan. And when we have collective bargaining units, that's why we end up with grievances, because if it's not in the performance plan, but they're being held accountable to it, and then they start getting things in writing, then we have a problem, right? So there is in my mind, a systemic problem for women and minority growth across the center.
Definitely minority group, but it's all women, any woman. I've never seen a single woman who's truly, if you really ask them, is feeling good right now, if they really think about it and talk about it.
I did have a male visitor with a similar thing where, they're held to a different standard of accountability. And it almost was like a plan to get rid of someone, so again, supervisors.
Minority male?
Yeah.
No.
Mine was a minority male.
Yeah, I had one male visitor who I'm going to have lunch with on Friday, hopefully you get the full story. But he was passed over for a chief position, and he felt that someone with the, quote, as he put it, right optics, meaning a younger female, got the position. But he said I clearly had the most experience, etc. And then one of the visitors, who was a female, is being harassed by her female boss and micromanaged, and she admitted to me that she has dyslexia, which she hasn't revealed to her boss, but she is picked on by how she writes her emails, for example, and how she organizes her thoughts. And I mean, I think there is a little bit of lack of empathy and neurodiversity of, I have ADD, very high on the charts there, which has weaknesses and fantastic strengths, right? Organizing an observatory really helps, actually, but getting my reports in really sucks. and within, say, a flight project, there's a certain culture of, your metrics are schedule and cost, period, right? And you overlook the human factors, and a lot of people feel stepped on. I've got battle scars of 10 years on a flight project. So it's not just say, in the science division, there's this kind of a culture where, hey, we could very easily put people first and still get our work done.
Exactly, that's what I was gonna say.
Right.
You can do it right.
I agree.
We don't let those people lead. We let the people who can people up lead. For whatever reason, we migrated to that, and that started around 2006, where the leadership began to shift into bully first, everything else last.
Interesting, 2006. No, I'm just thinking what the situation was in 2006, so that's interesting.
that's kind of when I noticed it.
Yeah, interesting.
I guess I'm not making the connection anymore.
But like for instance, we had the seminar, I don't know if you remember, a few years ago, Brene Brown
Uh-huh.
addressed
Mhm.
this, by a web link or whatever.
Yeah.
And she talked about how to, make teams work and make sure you touch base with people. I've never seen any of that
Yeah.
implemented.
Okay,
Right?
so-
It sounds great, but.
Yeah, so I feel really strongly about this. So one thing that I don't see here is leaders, meaning whatever kind of leader, right? I mean, but people who are leading teams of any size, I don't see accountability for good leadership practice or good leadership behavior.
There's no metric
So
for
I
that.
have, and I sent this out to actually Veronica and Cynthia, just because I wanted to talk with the two of them about it. That I have kind of my leadership principles that are very specific and have they are, it's harder to quantify some of this stuff, right? Some of this behavior. But I think that if you can articulate, here are the expectations of what you're going to be held to account as a leader, it becomes at least easier to be able to do the accountability. Because right now, I don't think that we have any way to hold people accountable for, and I'm trying to understand what is legal in this situation, because I've been told, well, you can't hold people accountable for behavior. Okay, I don't know what that means. I got to work on this separately. But I think that to me, the first thing we need to do is say, these are the leadership characteristics and behaviors that we expect people to have, and then we have to put that into performance plans, and we have to have that as, if you're going to get promoted, you have to be able to demonstrate that, you have that you have followed these, and I think at the very minimum we have to have something to be able to put as, this is the expectation, and that it's not a cure-all, right, because it's just words, but I think and we need to have that, and that's something that I want to roll out, as part of, Goddard 2040 is, what kind of leadership do we expect? And I think that our standards do need to be higher, just again, from what I've seen. I think we do have a lot of really good leaders. My concern is that I don't see any kind of, objective measure that we can measure people up to. So I think first we need that, and that's something that I'm going to bring up with the senior leadership team at our retreat, because like I said, I have it all written out. I mean, it's a little matrix, and it's pretty straightforward. It's just in normal language, right? And we're going to have to adopt something like that, and then figure out how we roll it into our HR practices. And again, I'm still learning, so I don't know exactly what is possible. So that's the next journey, right, is to figure out, okay, what can we do? But I have seen this before, right? It's like we accept people who are jerks because they deliver results, and that is just such a fallacy in so many ways, right? I mean, it's like, just dig into that statement at all, and it just completely falls apart. So, but there does seem to be, again, I've seen it before, that mentality of, well, yes, and right, don't take it so personally, or you know how they are, just and that's not, to me, that's not.
I've been told, oh, this guy's from Eastern Europe, he has an accent, it's just his accent, get used to it. Like, no, I know when someone's toxic, I don't need to. It doesn't matter what their accent is.
One thing we've actually recommended as ombuds before, but there is this cost association, is doing a 360 evaluation.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
supervisors do hear from their employees anonymously.
Mm-hmm.
So they really know what's working. We'd like to keep what is working, but where are the concerns and where it needs to be improved. I think NASA used to do some of
They
that,
did, yeah.
but it went away.
We do them in leadership development programs
Right,
as
right.
well. And you can have one, and then 5 years later, if you haven't done the work to be a better leader, your next 360 would be concluded.
Well,
and there's no accountability for.
But we should be doing 360s, I think, as part of the promotion
Yes.
practice,
Yes.
because we shouldn't be getting into the position in the first place, right? And that promotion practices are really, that's a really insidious place where things happen, because, it's usually not, especially at the lower levels, there's not a lot of oversight into the process. it's up to hiring managers. There, I mean, it's just there's so many opportunities for things to go awry, and the fact that it's not super transparent just increases that. So, so yeah, I mean, the fact that the problem is that we should understand their leadership capabilities before they're promoted into leadership.
Exactly.
Rather than having to go back and remediate. And that's the situation that we're probably in right now, is that we're gonna have to spend time in remediation. It's gonna be, there's gonna be some painful stuff that we have to go through now.
I know one leader who fought for the job simply because they didn't want the person they didn't like to be their boss.
Yeah.
So they didn't like that person, so they got the job, but they didn't want to be a leader. So there's a lot of that other stuff going on. The other thing I wanted to mention, God needs to do a lot of good teaming, and we work with contract companies and universities. I've been involved in a lot of this and seen from the inside how we deal with contractors. And there's a lot of really good rapport that we've built up over the years. The contract companies have their own HR, they have their own systems for DEI and all that. When it comes to university scientists, university scientists can bring horrific toxic behaviors into our workplace and control us through being PI. NASA has not done a good job at dealing with really, really bad PIs historically. Goddard's still in that situation. We accept these scientists coming in just because they're smart, but they treat people awfully. And that, in terms of Goddard teaming, I would love to see some thought into how universities can be given standards for some sort of behavioral practice that, we expect these people to be people.
Yeah.
Now, whether you can enforce that or not, I don't know, but
We
it's.
need to enforce it at home first.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a good point. It's good. I think that we do, and yes, on the PI front, come up with something that is done in the teaming process that sort of lays out, the expectations. I went through this and nearly got a PI removed, and had a really a center director who was really helpful. And I was on the contractor side, right? And I was like, look, I'm not gonna allow our people to be, treated this way. And luckily I had a center director who was really helpful, and, he went to headquarters and got sort of pre-clearance to be able to replace the PI. He went to the PI and said, look, this is just not okay anymore. I mean, it was kind of a big thing. And did he completely change? No. Did it get a lot better? Yes, right? But he was somebody who had been just allowed to kind of behave like that for a long time.
Yeah.
But this was an internal NASA PI, so there was more direct, there was more direct kind of control that could
And they can be,
exerted.
I've seen them be replaced, but I have yet to see university play.
Well, and I don't think, that's the mission kind of falls apart, right? So I think that that's a case where, in the process of vetting the PIs that we would want to work with, and then working with them early, I think that's something that that I can help with, right? Is sitting down with PIs or potential PIs early and saying, hey, the leadership aspect is really important to this job, and so I think that there are tones that can be set. That again, none of it is a panacea, but I think some of it is you have to give people the expectation ahead of time. And I think right now we aren't setting the right expectations for people. And so, I'm not saying they had no idea because we had never told them. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that it's awfully hard to come back, right? And then say, well, so we, and then of course that people look at that behavior, and that's the behavior that they're gonna adopt if they think that it's been rewarded, right? So then you're just raising another generation of people who think that that's okay.
That's what's scaring me. I'm seeing the young ones coming in start to change after a few years. Even my own past postdocs, I'm like, how can I can't affect that, because they're now in the system and they need to find a way to survive.
Yeah.
And move up the ladder, and it is rewarded.
Yeah. Like I said, this is we have some tough work ahead of us because it doesn't happen overnight. On the other hand, sometimes culture can change faster than people think. So I've seen some cultures change pretty rapidly. So I'm optimistic that I think that this is a solvable problem. It won't happen overnight, and it's going to take some real effort. On the other hand, it also is not rocket science, and so I think with just putting in some practices will at least help give us the ability to kind of go to the next step, right, which is again the accountability. So I don't discount anything that you've just said. I've seen this kind of thing before, and it makes me really sad to hear because, you know, we can do better. Yeah. Sorry.
I'm encouraged. This is fantastic, and I think that you being here is a very unique opportunity. If anyone has the opportunity to affect a change in a quick way, it's you because of who you are, your background, and I will tell you this: people are excited about you.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad to hear it. I think, you know, I'm excited to be here, and I do think that, you know, obviously, you know, it's not an accident, right? I mean, so there is, you know, I think that there's a recognition that there are some things that need to happen at Goddard, and that, you know, it's a very special place with a lot of special things going on, and so, and there are some things that need to change. But I think that the culture issue, I've also seen, you know, the argument that some people bring up is, you know, again, it's this like ridiculous straw man article of, well, but we need to put the best people in and blah, blah, blah. And that, I mean, that's just a silly argument, because once you start putting good leaders in place, then you see teams that are even more successful, so it, you know, it becomes kind of hard.
And more people succeed.
Well, of course.
They've lost some.
Of course, yeah. I think, you know, another thing, and because you brought up neurodivergence, that I think is, that again, this is a little bit harder to tackle, but, you know, we've talked a lot about in the leadership team of ensuring that we have the right people in the right roles at the right time. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, say, this person is going to be in this same role throughout the entire project. Mm-hmm. They might be like ideally suited to something in phase C, but not in phase A and B. In fact, I see that split a lot because phase A and B is often like kind of more creative, and you got to do a lot of, you know, different things. You got to go fast. And then phase C is like, okay, now we're going to build something, and it's very methodical, and, you know, and they're different. And sometimes the people who need to be on the team need to change out just because of the nature of what they're good at and well suited to. And I think that we also need to do a good job of ensuring that we're looking at our employees in a very individualistic way and understanding what their strengths are and how we put people in the right places. Now that is hard, especially depending on how many, you know, direct reports people have. So I haven't found an easy answer to that, but I think we do need to start doing that, because again, you need to know where someone is going to thrive, and that's part of leadership, is putting them in a place where they're going to thrive. And sometimes even they don't know that, right? Sometimes, you know, somebody says, I've had this, well, I want to do this thing, and I'm like, I know you do, but you will not, you're not gonna, I mean, I wouldn't say this right, but I'm like, we can try that and give you support, but I know in my mind, I'm like, they're not gonna be successful, and they're not gonna even like it. They don't realize that this is a job that they think they should do because of whatever reason, but they're not gonna enjoy it because they're not gonna be successful because it's totally ill-suited to everything that they're good at, right? And I think that we need to, without being paternalistic about it, right, but I think we need to really treat our employees as individuals and think more about how we get more out of everyone by, you know, having them in the right places. But again, you know, these are long-term things to tackle, but I think that they are solvable problems.
The increase of shadowing and details in particular, the IBV culture, just another piece of insight. They only pretty much let somebody go in a detail historically if they wanted to get rid of them.
Get rid of them, yeah.
And that is so counterintuitive to career growth, particularly at an institution that is segregated from the rest of the organization. So and then one of the things that I think we as ombuds would ask is support from you as the center director to integrate us with the formal processes in a more collaborative way. Right now, I find it a struggle to really get detailed insight into how this particular formal process works. Like, I've asked a couple of questions, what are the next steps of this formal process? And I kind of get stonewalled. And I would really like to work collaboratively with the ADR group, the EO group, all of it. Like, let's have some insight as ombuds into those processes, because we can't advocate for a fair process if we don't know the process. Or if we are stonewalled from if the process has changed. Like, we can read NPRs until our eyeballs fall out, but it doesn't mean we know what the next steps are.
I think some of that occurred more in the past, but as soon as you have a lot of changeover, some of those best practices fall to the wayside. One of the things we often hear from our visitors, I didn't know where else to go, so thank you. So
Right, yeah.
your support, supervisors, we try and do presentations to even
Yeah.
different divisions or codes
Absolutely.
and posters and information out there. But I think we need to understand the formal process. One of the things I find a challenge sometimes, they want to do a harassment or a formal grievance and think it's going to happen overnight. It's
Oh,
a very
boy.
long process,
Yeah,
so we
I
just have to
know.
let them know
I know.
it's not going to be over a few weeks.
And it is
Mhm,
painful,
mhm.
and, yeah, I mean, I've not had to do that myself in my career, but I have witnessed, and it doesn't do anyone any good. I mean, you have to do it, right? I'm not saying that I would ever discourage someone, but it helps almost nobody, because in the end, everybody loses. And so what you have to do is prevent that from getting to that point, right, is creating a culture where those kind of behaviors are unacceptable, and they're sort of, culturally shunned, so that if somebody behaves like that, they are not kind of accepted in the culture, because that is unacceptable behavior. But I do think, it's interesting, we see a lot more, in the last however many years, I think we see a lot more just like blatant anti-LGBT, blatant racism. And people feel, I mean, I'm just talking about out in the world, right? That it seems that people feel more emboldened to say and do things that had previously been like, if it's in your head, just shut up. Like, just keep it in your head. We don't need to hear it, right? Things that were not socially acceptable that seem to now have become somehow more socially acceptable. And I wonder if this is part of what we're seeing in the workplace, is that people are more emboldened to have less empathy and to be more sort of reactionary.
And the lack of the repercussions that come with it.
Yeah.
That also helps to make people feel a lot more comfortable.
Somehow the pandemic taught everyone that you bring everything to work because we were all in our homes.
Yeah.
Before that, people, you'd come to work and you'd be your work self, which was a nice person with your colleagues. Now you're your self, and some of those people are just being mean and nasty to everybody because that's how they are at home.
Well, I think also social isolation is also just straight up bad for people.
Yeah.
And to excess, right? I mean, and everybody has kind of a different threshold, but in general, we have had like a couple years of extreme social isolation, and we're animals that are social creatures, and I think that has also done some real damage to our ability to interact in ways that are healthy to each other. So I think that we need to build back some of our social skills in general. I hope that we will see a change there over time, but I think probably some damage has been done that is just going to be lasting, right? I mean, we didn't know what the impact of having everybody be alone in their houses for 2 years was going to be. I think it's not good, right?
There's a trauma footprint that got put down there, and one of the things I try to help my managers understand is you need to accept that that's there and give people a little grace.
Right.
And we are not, boy, Goddard, we're just headlong into let's produce this now.
And our commitments have not eased up, right? It's not like we're getting any slack in terms of the work that we have to do and the cost and the schedule. So it's, none of that changes. And so, it's an added burden. And in fact, it's in some ways gotten tougher because we have faced, budget problems, which just make everything, harder. So, I think that there's a real culture shift that we need to make. And so, one ask I would have of you is also to keep having the pulse on what's going on and keep me up to speed. For one thing, thank you for what you're doing, because I do think it is really important, and ombuds offices are known to be, again, a best practice. So I'm excited for what you're doing, but keep me posted on what is kind of out there, because like I said, I think there's some real cultural shifts that we need to make, and we have places where communication needs to happen and accountability needs to happen in differing amounts. And that's the other thing, right, is that we may have places that are better than others where we can say, okay, maybe here are some areas to focus on first, right? Like prioritizing some parts of Goddard, because like you said, it's, okay, it's one microcosm, but then you put them all together, it's a lot. That being said, there are probably areas that we need to prioritize because they need the most work or they need the most immediate accountability. That would be really helpful because it's going to be really hard to sort of just like try to blanket across the board, and it's always easier to triage. So I could use some help there.
I'll give you one hint. Within the new missions, like line of business kind of new missions, creating new hardware, the things that are on the docket to be a flight mission. Goddard seems to be very willy-nilly just moving people around like crazy and grabbing this supervisor and throwing them over here, grabbing this engineer and throwing them over here. We've had people pulled from projects and almost killed the project. I don't know what's going on at the higher level as to why they're getting plucked, but it might be political, but when that happens, you might just pull this good person and help this project. But you've devastated the entire team. And there's some real devastation that's been going on the last year and a half.
Okay.
By whatever's going on in that domino or moving around the cards over there. And I would just say, maybe that's something to think about if you're prioritizing the leadership eye, that those leaders pay attention to the workforce damage that they cause in those teams.
No, that's helpful because one of the things that we've been talking about with the senior leadership team is how we work as a team more, instead of just in our sort of siloed functions, right? And part of that is ensuring that when a decision is being considered, that we understand what the repercussions are, and that means that we're all going to have to, as senior leaders, operate with a little bit more transparency as well because we need to know where that's happening. So that's helpful, and a common thing I've seen elsewhere too is just like or people getting plucked because this program over here is in trouble, and then it's like, well, what, I wasn't even told, and now this person's gone the next day.
If you're plucking them, at least give some.
There should be a discussion, right? There should be a discussion, exactly. So
those conversations aren't happening.
Right. So no, that's helpful to know because again, that goes to the kind of the siloing of all these functions, and we need to be more, truly collaborative, which is thinking about when we make decisions that are disruptive, is it the right thing for Goddard as a whole? And because sometimes you're going to have winners and losers, right? And so you have to look at, okay, what does the center really need on par or on the whole? What's the least worst impact, right? But that should be a deliberate decision and not just like it just happened because it happened, right? So yeah, that's again a cultural issue, right? Going back to the transparency and the discussions, but if you've got the right leaders in place, then they should be able to talk to each other about things that are even difficult decisions, right?
Sure.
And I think maybe some of that is also the conflict avoidant nature that is also just human. Human beings in general do not like confrontation and conflict with each other. And so, and most people are not given really tools to be able to do that. You mentioned that you have background in mediation. That's fantastic because most people have no idea how to kind of work through a conflict. And that's probably something that we really need to get better at sharing. It doesn't have to be a personal conflict. We have a shared problem to work through, and sometimes that has to get elevated. But when something gets elevated, it shouldn't be because we both can't agree. It can be maybe we really can't decide which option is better or worse, right? They're really like competing priorities. We can't decide who's needed where. Now we have to elevate it because we need someone else to kind of adjudicate it. But I think a lot of what happens is people want to avoid all of that, and so then they just make a decision unilaterally, right? And then nobody else knows, and then it's too late. So, yeah.
I think that communication from senior leadership manager down to the actual employees sometimes, I think, management assumes the worker on the ground knows, and they really don't.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this with diversity and inclusion too, right? It's like often, like the ground floor of people are like all on board. New employees, they're all on board. The top leadership level, all on board, says the right things, but it's the middle management. It is all of the middle management layers where these issues are. And so we have to put some focus there, and that's hard because it's a lot of people, right? But that's where the majority of our people are being managed at, and we have to put focus there. So that's something that we're going to have to do some more work on. And if I don't get my passport photo taken,
I was about,
they're going to.
I was getting ready to jump in.
Yeah,
Wow.
I have to go get my passport photo taken for my government.
And it's like 6 months to get it back.
Thank you so
What a
much. Yeah,
fantastic
no,
meeting.
great to talk, and we will talk. And yeah, I think you were talking about frequency of meetings.
Yeah.
What has been the frequency?
Very little.
Okay,
That's exactly
yeah,
why I
so,
wanted to
yeah.
talk about it.
Okay.
Quarterly, whatever you want.
Yeah, well, I think quarterly would be. I wouldn't want to do less than quarterly, because what I'm hoping is that we can make some. I'd like to sort of move out on some things so that over the next year maybe we see a little bit of movement in some areas. So
And if we have feedback from this meeting, should we put together something to send you?
absolutely,
Okay.
yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. Think about it, yeah, mull it over a little bit,
All
and
right.
and yeah, no, let's keep the conversation going, and always feel free to reach out to Shalise too if you think like, hey,
Thanks, Shalene.
we need to talk, like we need to talk now, like sooner rather than later. Then she can make sure that happens. So.
Or if you need to talk to us, we'll.
Yeah, we're always here for you.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, looking forward to let's make some things better. I think we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Send some dates with you guys, and, quarterly to meet with her, and then I'll make sure I fit it in the calendar. I do advise to do it sooner rather than later, because the world is trying to get to her.
Oh,
I mean,
sure.
I'm not even trying to, it's
I can
been
imagine.
And I would
interesting.
assume it's difficult even doing standard, like the third Wednesday.
Yeah, we may have to play by ear with just, some dates, because we have standard meetings already in
Right, yeah,
place.
yeah.
So,
But could you suggest what a good open time so far is to us?
so it's weird,
Yeah.
right? Monday mornings, we're typically completely booked until 12. And then on Wednesday, so those are the 2 days I would initially say to stay away from.
Right.
So Tuesdays and Thursdays are pretty much days that we have a little bit of flexibility. Fridays, we typically also have standing meetings,
Right.
for most of the days.
So Tuesday, Thursday.
Tuesday,
Mhm.
Thursday.
So we may have some, windows open on Monday afternoon or Wednesday afternoon, but yeah, Tuesday, Thursdays, I would stick with that.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome, and as you mentioned, if there's anything, please just send it to us and we'll see what we can do. We have a lot of work to do.
At least the tone is in the right direction.
It's,
Oh,
the
yeah.
tone is amazing.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing.
Oh, sure, thank you.
Appreciate it. Her ears are wide open, so.
You can't make a difference if you don't tell the truth, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's what she wants.
I'm in truth telling mode lately, so.
Yeah, because you guys were quite different from when Dave, you met with
Well,
Dave,
yeah,
so this was,
yeah.
I was like, oh, look at the energy, okay. So, thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well,
Okay.
appreciate your help.
Anytime.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Wow. Are we, this is one good again?
I'm gonna look at the road.
I'm not able to, I should. One of my daughter's, close friends was yesterday was hit on his motorcycle.
Oh, no.
On a hit and run.
I saw it on the news.
It was
Oh
on the
my God,
news,
I'm so sorry.
he's in critical condition.
Oh my God.
But his mom still has younger kids at home, so I cooked some food.
You
and I'm
go
gonna bring it
attend to
over
them.
to them, I promised I would drop it off. when I leave.
Had a friend got hit on his motorcycle in Pennsylvania.
Listen, I was at work, this was probably 10 years ago, and I'm driving through the gate, and I got a phone call from my husband's friend. And he said, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, I thought you guys were riding. And he said, well, I'm calling you because they're airlifting him to Shopton. And I said, stop playing, because they always joke around. So I said, stop playing, I'm on my way home. And he said, no, really. And he was in the hospital for 3 days because they were doing construction in the gravel, and he just slid.
That's how I laid my motorcycle down not too long ago.
And all the skin off it, yeah.
Convertibles are fun.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Terrible.
less likely to roll it over than they are.
Yeah.
So, it's, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So I'm gonna try to get the food to them, but, do you guys wanna sit here and talk about dates or times?
I was just gonna look at dates, if we wanted to look at dates, because October would be the first.
list of thoughts to like write out.
Mhm.
Because in my head, like, I've, got an outline for her for, okay, how to implement, my ADD brain is already working, but I would love to, like, have a time when we can, like, kind of sit down and say, do and process some of this.
And also, there are some younger folks over in my area who are sitting down in groups and trying to come up with recommendations like,
Fantastic.
we want more accountability, and our leadership's like, sorry, we're not going to do. But they have all this stuff written down. It'd be great to kind of merge some of that into this because they know what they need to function. But they have no ear, there's no one that has an ear for them, so.
And where
They're all asking for that.
where their ears
Leadership,
to
accountability,
the
it's all
center
about.
director, which, I don't know if I mentioned this in email to you all, or it was just the people who went to the conference. I said, one of the big things I got out of there is, it's not just that ombuds report to the center director, meaning that that gives us the ability to do what we do. It gives the center the credentials that everyone has in here up to the highest level if necessary, right?
Right.
And so, it sounds like it's kind of go time for us if we're doing this in that area.
So I kind of think selecting dates is action one, and then pulling together some thoughts into like we should have our own retreat to talk about some of these things and what we think things could look like to work through a systematic. Okay, here's stuff.
And
we wanna talk to her
recommendations,
about.
we're allowed to offer recommendations.
Yep.
So you're thinking October is probably the next?
Yeah, I think that's probably the next best time. If we wanted to try and set a regular, we could find out when in. We pick like a Tuesday or Thursday.
And October's probably pretty good because from what I understand from procurement, October is when everyone has to start coming back 3 days a week. So maybe between now and then.
Is that gonna be in Nassauite or Goddard?
I had not heard that.
What, you mean coming back? Are they making like official?
Procurement is doing it on a phase to like in June, people, they say October 1 day, come 2 days, and then come end of September, October 1, they expect everyone to be here 3 to 2 Tuesdays. That's how procurement is doing it.
Yeah. And of course, there's the backlash when Mackenzie sent out the email saying, hey, it'd be great if you came in 3 days a week, and
Well, that's where it's.
and people were like, well, you don't have to because it's not a directive, but you're saying it's going to be a directive.
Well, procurement made it.
I think it'll be office
based on-
specific for now, I don't think.
Oh, office specific, I see.
Yeah.
Well, and then that's with our collective bargaining and employees in those organizations.
Mhm.
Um,
But her point is, it's really better for us all to be more in touch.
I'm gonna find a time to articulate to her that some people do thrive in a more secluded environment and are capable of building programs and everything.
I'm getting a reasonable accommodation.
Yeah.
For all my workshops this summer, I will welcome seclusion for at least a week or two.
It is individual, that's true.
Trying to get one.
And they, I like it.
Well, mine actually fine with the, I don't,
I like
I wish I
that.
could come
I
into
just
work, 'cause I don't
wonder,
like being
I
away
must-
as much as I am.
The other thing I'm finding with submission support offices, not only are they only in 1 day a week, if that, they're out of office every Monday or Friday, trying to get work done for
Friday
them.
a lot,
They're also
yeah.
Monday or Friday. Yeah. And nobody tells you, so you don't know that the NSSC is working a 4-day week and don't try and get anything done on a Friday, so.
It's not like here, if someone's out there with a sign on the door saying, I'm away today, there's no way you can virtually know unless someone has a.
Unless you send them an
let-
action,
yeah,
they might
if
say.
they're not there. You're
We
right
need
about
to
that.
set an away message. We just need to make it a cultural practice to set away messages on our Microsoft accounts, cause you can see those virtually and then you put a sign on the door, here's my office hours.
Yeah, not a lot of people do that though.
No. Alright, I'm gonna pull up all of our calendars and pull some dates.
Mine probably will be up to date for October, but other than So